Welcome to Annapolis Mosaics. Our program spotlights people in our community who are involved in activities intended to promote good human relations. I am Michael Keller, the chair of the Annapolis Human Relations Commission and your host. The commission is a city board that seeks to promote equal opportunity and to eliminate discrimination. My guest today is Enrique Melendez, who is an activist and community organizer in the Latino community. Enrique, welcome to Annapolis Mosaics.
Michael, thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Our program today is going to focus on a discussion with Enrique about a county council proposal that would establish English as the official language of Anne Arundel County. Enrique, this legislation really is part of a national movement that seeks to mandate English as the official language in terms of official government operations. It seems to establish English as sort of the exclusive language that would be used in any kind of government operations per se. Is that a fair description of what this effort is all about?
I think in general, on the surface, that's what is described. Mm-hmm. But one then would think about the reality of, is it really needed? Because historically, there has not been a need.
Mm-hmm. But this effort does seem to have momentum, does it not? There is no legislation at the national level. There are 50 countries in the world in which English is the official language, but the United States is not among them. The United States historically has had shall we say, a linguistic tolerance and has not adopted any kind of legislation that would establish an official language. Nonetheless, 28 states have passed laws that have mandated English as being the official language. Maryland is not among them, but you still have a majority of states that have already moved in this direction, and there's efforts in other states. So it does seem to have momentum, doesn't it?
Well, there's a saying that when the economy is bad and there's a recession or a depression, whichever economic stage you want to call it, people then tend to focus on matters that I would call trivial, especially elected officials. And we're in a state at this point in the country where you have a lot of rhetoric, political rhetoric, very right-wing, that are really anti-immigrant. Mm-hmm. And of course, we all know the majority of immigrants in this country, right now, are either Spanish or Chinese. They're the largest numbers coming in. But being that those that are xenophobic, I would call, which are really scared of something that's different to their culture or language, take the position concern against being anti-immigrant, and then they use what I call the facade of the language tool and declaring English official language as a tool to further push an anti-immigrant movement. Mm-hmm. But I believe those are two issues, and you mentioned why we're different. We're very different because the way this country was founded. Mm-hmm. Our founding fathers were not only elected officials at that time. I think they were great statesmen, and they were very smart. Mm-hmm. They saw that at that time, and even today, we are a multilingual country. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have that capability. Back then, our founding fathers had that capability. Mm-hmm. German, French, and other languages were frequently taught, and they knew when they were putting together the Articles of Federation, our Constitution, they knew it would be to their detriment if they would try to push English as official language, because it really goes against the grain of the populist position on the basis of our country.
Mm-hmm. Let's look at some of the arguments that have been made in favor of legislation, such as the proposal that's being considered by the county council at the present time. One of those arguments is that it promotes unity, that if everyone speaks the same language, that it facilitates what we could call melting pot assimilation. How would you respond to that argument?
I think it's a farce. I think, first of all, most immigrants that come into this country eventually, by second generation, speak fluent English, and English is the primary language. The first generation usually has a challenge, and that's, I don't know about you, but I know many friends of mine whose parents were off the boat, if you will. They knew the language, but were shy to speak it. Any assistance you can give in their language was always welcomed. But by the second generation, people spoke English. So I always find that the concept of unity, I think we're united as we're going to be. This bill will not make a difference. And historically, we've proven, like all the 1800s, discrimination against Irish or Italians, there were xenophobic feelings that, oh, well, we're going to become another Ireland, another Italy. Well, that wasn't true. Over time, we assimilate in this country, all immigrants do, and we become what we are, true Americans, which are of multi-origin, multicultural, ethnic origin.
Well, you know, and in fact, the point is that there does seem to be a real interest on behalf of not just second generation, but first generation immigrants to learn English. You know, courses in English as a second language, programs that are available for people to learn English. Isn't it correct that these programs are really heavily in demand and very often overbooked in many instances? There's tremendous demand for it. There does seem to be a real genuine interest in the Latino community, certainly in our area, in terms of learning English. Has that been your experience? This is again, we're talking about first generation, people who've just come here from Latin America. You know, they're in the culture for the first time. Maybe they haven't spoken English before, but there seems to be an interest on part of many of them to learn English very quickly.
Absolutely, and actually, when I was president of the school board, we saw that requirement and demand. So as a result, the school system has put in a lot of effort to help with the adults, the parents of the students, and so on. So yeah, that is correct. And also I'm the president of the board of directors of the Centro de Ayuda, the Center of Help, and we have many programs that deal with trying to help the parents, the adults, the first generation, assimilate, and they're more than happy when we provide those services.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about the programs that are sponsored by Centro de Ayuda as it relates to English language competence, and because I think it's very important for our viewers to hear this.
Sure, we basically work with the school system, and sometimes we get grants from the community college or other nonprofits that allow us to help recruit parents. Where we act like an outreach facilitator for a lot of these programs who are trying to get adults to attend. So because we're really a social services nonprofit group that's entrenched in the Hispanic community in the city of Annapolis, and people from all over the county come to the Center of Help, we're kind of a gateway to find these folks for other nonprofits or for school programs that deal with these issues.
Yeah, and you know, the second argument, one argument that's been used in support of legislation like this is that it empowers immigrants, that if they're forced to learn English, therefore they'll get a better education and get better jobs, et cetera, et cetera. But what I'm hearing you say, Enrique, is that that kind of thing isn't really necessary, that the immigrants themselves already recognize that both occupationally and educationally they're advantaged by learning English in a country where English is the predominant language spoken, and they do it anyway. So they don't need to have legislation like this to prompt them. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that was actually verified in the council hearing by a Naval Academy professor who said the same thing. I said, look, by osmosis, things happen.
Right.
And it's always happened in this country, and that's what we're great. That's what's great about the United States.
Right.
And to have this bill, and we'll talk about it later, the negative aspect of having such a bill, I think it would be a detriment to the spirit of us being Americans.
Right. Well, you know, and the third argument that's been raised in support of this kind of legislation is that it enhances common sense government policy in the sense that the government is not duplicating services and publications in multiple languages. It just costs the taxpayers monies to do this, and that there shouldn't be documents that are produced in Spanish, or there shouldn't be translators provided in Spanish, and that this saves the taxpayer money. How would you respond to that?
Well, I would agree if that's the issue, then say that in the bill. For example, I would say in the bill, okay, and by the way, that's an executive branch budget issue. That's not a legislative branch issue.
Right.
If they want to cut budget and they can justify in the rationale why they don't need to have multilingual brochures, then do that. Again, it has nothing to do with passing a bill making English the official county language.
Again, but there are a lot of arguments that have been presented against this legislation, as well, as I think you're aware of. I think the one that comes out the most is that it isolates the fastest growing ethnic group, not only in the city of Annapolis or Anne Arundel County or Maryland, but nationally from the rest of the population. Basically, the legislation, it's argued, puts out a "you are not welcome" mat to them. It basically communicates that you're really not welcome here. Do you think do you think it does that, or do you think maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration to say that it does that?
Well, I believe the proponents of the bill, actually what they're about is being be it illegal undocumented workers, and they're right on, but they can't say that publicly at this point, these elected officials, so they're using this official language bill as a front for that. Again, I don't believe it's warranted, and it doesn't, the means does not justify the end.
And it's also argued that this bill has a corrosive impact on civil liberties in the sense that it hinders people's access to government services, or at least has the potential of doing that, but that it also raises free speech issues. You know, why are you trying to restrict someone from speaking in their first language?
Exactly, and for example, our bill was not clear. It just says that it will be official language of the county. You and I could be outside speaking French in Glen Burnie, outside a bar, and the police, who represents the government, can come to us and say, hey, don't speak French, speak English. And that impacts our civil liberty. Many of us in this county are multilingual, and when does it stop? When does it end? It's encroachment of our personal liberties, and a bill that's not well defined and articulate, which is what was written. And I know lawyers and legislators, they tend to be ambiguous and not clear, so they could do these wraparound ploys in taking away potential rights of the citizenry, and I think that's what we want to stop.
Yeah, and another argument is that the bill implies that there's something wrong with other languages besides English, which would be a most unfortunate position to have. Would you not agree? At a time when globalization is becoming so important, we've become a global world, and you know, with mass communication, people need to be encouraged to learn other languages. And you know, when you have a bill such as this, the implication is that English is the only thing you should be learning.
Yeah, exactly. There's two sides. One is, historically, as you know, even before the 13 colonies, Spanish was spoken in this country. The lower 48 states of the United States, before 1776, spoke Spanish because the Spanish were here. Right. And they're still here, and they're not going away. And you're right, the Hispanic community is the largest ethnic rising group. So the issue will not go away as for people speaking multi-language. From the outside in, I work around the world. I travel all over the world. And Americans that are deemed multilingual are a great asset. Right. In fact, we're frowned upon as a country because most Americans don't speak two languages, and everything's got to be in English. So to me, it's funny that the business community in the United States wants people to be multilingual, to expand their global presence. Yet here we are in this county and other parts of the United States with some elected officials frowning upon other languages and making English official language. I think goes against the whole grain of what we United States stand for.
Well, we're going to take a break right now, but when I return, We'll be talking with Enrique Melendez about the specific legislation that's before the Anne Arundel County Council. Good. We're talking today with Enrique Melendez, who is an activist and organizer in the Latino community in Annapolis. And we're focusing specifically today on the issue of a proposed piece of legislation that is before the Anne Arundel County Council that, if enacted, would establish English as the official language of Anne Arundel County. Enrique, could you tell our viewers exactly what this bill would do? I mean, is it just symbolic, or would it have substantive impact?
Well, it can have a lot of negative impact, I think, to the county. But let's talk about what it says.
Okay.
It really doesn't talk a lot about much of what it does. All it says is English shall be the official and common language of Anne Arundel County, as for official documents, communications, so on and so forth. Well, what it doesn't say is where does it stop? And I think the implications for us as citizens, we're not sure, but it is so broad that I believe it can lead to treating multilingual citizens, legal residents, as citizens, second-class citizens because they speak another language. Mm-hmm. Yet I also know, in speaking to the proponents of the bill, that their real reason is because they promise during elections that we'll take an anti-immigrant approach and pass some legislation. Mm-hmm. Well, to me, that's a federal responsibility that does not belong with the county council. The county council has enough issues to worry about which they're not addressing, especially economic development in this county, and I really wish they would focus on more important issues.
Mm-hmm. So you don't see this then as strictly a symbolic act in which they simply are making a statement that they think it's important for people to recognize that English is the predominant language in the United States, which of course is not something they would really need to say anyway, sort of like passing a piece of legislation calling the hot dog the official language of baseball games. I mean, it's the same thing. So you see this as having potentially negative impact on real people in terms of the programs and services that they received from the county government.
Absolutely. I mean, we have to cut the head of the snake right now, because this is going to open the door for other legislation, which I believe will be hurting more the population, the ethnic population of this county. Specifically, it's going to lead to racial profiling. I think it's going to be hard to enforce such a bill. And really, what is next? The official skin color of the county? When does it stop? And that's really what concerns me as a U.S. citizen and proud to be American, that this will infringe on civil rights and our liberties and our democratic values. And it is symbolic by their perspective, the proponents of the bill, because they know it really has no value, because the benefits of our language, we already have it today. Most people deal in business in English. If they have an issue that documents are being published by the county at the county's expense in another language other than English, then address that issue, but don't use English as an official language as the excuse behind the political rhetoric.
What's the status of the bill right now?
Well, basically it was pulled away. One of the proponents, Councilman Walker, who pulled it. By the way, and I personally like the guy. I mean, he's a good man. He pulled it, but he said they're going to go back and reword it, whatever that means. I just hope they drop it. And if they really want to save money as for county costs and then have a bill do that, but between you and I, That's an executive matter. They should just coordinate with Leopold and the administration and then do something about that issue. But I strongly believe they should drop the English official language bill because it has no value. And to us, the people of this county, I think it sends the wrong message that our county councils are not working on matters that we care about.
You attended the public hearing on the bill. Could you tell us a little bit about what happened at that public hearing? What kinds of groups spoke either in support of or in opposition to the bill? What kinds of arguments that were raised? What were the dynamics of the meeting?
Actually, it was very interesting. Before it started, I got word through the county councilman that they were going to pull the bill. So actually, he asked us not to necessarily testify, but if we wanted, we could. The group that I was with, we decided to still testify, even though it was pulled off the docket. The NAACP was there, stating against the bill. I actually was representing the Maryland Hispanic Chamber of Commerce as a vice chairman. We were against the bill, so representing the business community. We had other leaders, professors from the Naval Academy, CASA of Maryland, who really tries to defend a lot of the issues with the immigrant population. And we have educators, people in the school system, people in nonprofits like the Center Help, all saying that it has no value. If anything, it has negative repercussion to the people and to the community. And there was only one person, I believe, spoke for it. I think it was just an individual citizen. But again, I think they were using the wrong arguments. It was more like, hey, if you live here, speak English. Again, that's not the issue.
Have you had a conversation about the legislation with any individual members of council, perhaps with the sponsor of the legislation, other members of the council about this? Have you spoken to them?
Yes,
I mean, there are co-sponsors of the legislation. The bill, as you said, was withdrawn, but it was primarily, as you stated, for the purpose of looking at it. There's a potential for it to come back. So if you've got four co-sponsors, that's a majority of the council. So have you had an opportunity to talk with members of council about it and share your views? And what have you heard from them? What do they say?
Yes, I spoke to Councilman Grasso, who was very for the bill, and I explained to him what's your justification. And actually, he just came back and, well, it's costing the county again. So I told him, if you have an issue about duplicating county documents in another language, then say that. You're not saying that in the bill. So his rationale did not make sense, didn't hold muster. Again, I believe it was an anti-immigrant feeling. Councilman Walker, all he said, he promises his constituents to address illegal immigration. And again, what does this language bill have to do with that? They're not the federal government. And I think if they want to do that, they should run for Congress. So I also talked to Jamie Benoit. He supports it, of course. Chris Trumbaugh, he's against it. Chris Trumbaugh is against it. The new county councilman, Peter Smith, he's going to be against it. So hopefully, Mr. Frank, I didn't get a chance to speak to him. I did send a message to Mr. Ladd, and I believe he may be open to reverse his original position because he realizes the constituencies are not happy with their position.
How about the county executive on this? If you had 4 members of council support it and 3 oppose it, obviously the county executive's in a position where he could block its passage if he chose to with a veto. Also, as the county executive would be responsible for actually implementing it if it becomes law. Have you had any conversations with any member of the county executive's office, possibly with the county executive or with some of his staff, about how he feels about this?
I haven't had a chance to talk to Mr. Leopold about this, but for the record, the Anne Arundel County Human Rights Commission was opposed to this bill, which are really appointees of Mr. Leopold.
Yes.
I believe, though, Mr. Leopold would support being against this bill because I think he would find this bill adding no value, really against the grain of what this country has history and the values we stand for. So I hope that he would be against such a bill.
Yeah, and just for the record as well, at the time of the last public hearing, the Annapolis Human Relations Commission had not taken a position on it. However, since the public hearing, the Annapolis Commission has adopted a resolution in opposition to the proposed legislation. And should there be another public hearing, the Commission will be present at that hearing to express its opposition to its passage. So you'll have both the county and the city human relations commissions now in opposition, formally in opposition to this proposal.
That's good. That's great news, and thank you.
Yeah. What has been the reaction of the local Latino community to the legislation? I mean, certainly one expects that, you know, organizations and their leaders are going to be foremost in terms of being identified in reaction to, giving reaction to bills such as this. Sometimes it's less clear what the rank and file think of it. To what extent do you know, how do individual members of the public who are of Latino descent, do they have much of an opinion about it, one way or the other?
Yeah,
thought about it?
I think most of the leaders, but no, the rank and file. Let's talk about the rank and file.
Okay.
Mostly are opposed because, first of all, once they understand what's in the bill, they can see how it's so broad, the language, you can't enforce it, and it will lead to abuse, number one. Number two is, they consider it being anti anything that's not English, okay, period. So being anti-Latino or whatever. So they're not too happy about that. They see their rights being infringed upon, the civil rights, and the ability to speak what language they want. But again, because the bill is not clear. From a business perspective, business leaders are opposed because, first of all, you know, Maryland as a state is not business friendly. Then you get to Anne Arundel County, we're the same thing. So here we are in economic tough times, and we're going to scare business away. People will not want to establish business here if they feel we live in a community where you have such positions. I just came back from Arizona in the conferences, national conferences in the aviation industry. Many people that normally attend did not show up. Why? Because of the position of Arizona on some of the anti-immigration stance.
You mentioned to me earlier that you just came back from Frederick County, where I think Frederick County, I believe, is the only jurisdiction in the state so far to adopted something like this, where their county council did pass a provision that establishes English as an official language. What impact, if any, has that piece of legislation had? You know, what practical impact has it had? Has it had a negative impact in terms of the day-to-day lives of Hispanic members of that community? Are they already feeling effects in terms of community services? What's happened up there?
I think, if anything, it just draws confusion by the population. They're not sure what does this mean and what it's going to lead to, and we'll see what happens. You know, the county council there is primarily actually a Republican county, and they passed a bill. I'm not believe there was a voice like we had in Anne Arundel County to protest against this bill. Again, Anne Arundel County is not Frederick County, and we're not going to be Frederick County, so we will always oppose such a bill. And so I do not know the long-term implications. I doubt from the government they feel there is one. But if anything, I just think what is done in the near term is cause some confusion within the Latino population on where's the government heading on this, and it's not clear. And they really lack the leadership of a Hispanic community leadership group like we do here.
In summary, what would you tell our viewers in terms of the advice that you would have in terms of persuading them in terms of their own personal positions on this legislation? Why is this an important issue? Many of our viewers are going to say, well, why is this so important? We've got so many other problems on our collective plate nationally? Why is a bill that establishes English, which is, again, the premier language of the United States, as the official language, so what? Why should they be concerned about this?
I think they should be concerned because actually it's a front on the surface that seems simple. You know, let's just call English official language because it's all understood. We all speak English. But the reality is it's going to lead to discrimination, racial profiling for those that other ethnic groups, and actually treat U.S. citizens and legal residents that are multilingual as second-class citizens. And again, if they were to be explicit in what they're trying to do in this bill and clear, then maybe people can support such a bill. But when it's such a broad definition of English as official language of the county, that's too broad, and that's going to lead to abuse. And I think the citizens, we should realize it goes against the Constitution, the Founding Fathers, and the belief of free spirit in this country. And I believe that's what they should worry about. When will it end?
Thank you for viewing our program today, and please join us again on Annapolis Mosaics. If you would like to have more information about the Annapolis Human Relations Commission, please jot down the information that's on your screen. You can reach us at 410-263-7998 or by email at hrcommission@annapolis.gov. Or check out our page at the City of Annapolis website. Go to www.annapolis.gov, click on the Boards and Commissions icon, and then scroll down to the Human Relations Commission page. And always remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "We have flown the air like birds and swum the seas like fishes, but have yet to learn the simple act of walking the earth as brothers and sisters." Thank you, Enrique. That was good.
Very good.
Summed this up.
Appreciate being on the
Good.
show.
Happy to have you. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about this important issue.